Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. This is a very interesting committee investigation. They have Professor Bruce Pardy testifying, and he puts down the Liberals. He answers all the Conservatives' questions. He must make you ask yourself some questions. What is this government up to? Let's take a look.
Professor Pardy, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do agree with the comments of the previous two speakers. In February 2022, the Globe and Mail published a column with the title, "It's Time to Stop the Sedition by Enforcing the Law and Following the Money." It said, people have been terrorized for over a week. Seditionists and terrorists. Who is the author talking about? February 2022. Yes, of course, the truckers. No violence, no weapons, no assaults, no storming of Parliament, parking violations, road hockey, dancing in the snow, unkind words about the government, seditionists and terrorists. Who is the author of this column? Can you guess? One, Mark Carney, now the Prime Minister. In 1992, American political theorist Samuel Francis coined the term anarcho-tyranny. Anarcho-tyranny, he said, is a kind of government dysfunction. The dysfunction occurs when a government is simultaneously unable or unwilling to deal with serious crime, leading to a kind of anarchy, while at the same time being ruthlessly oppressive in punishing minor transgressions of law-abiding people. The government allows violence, theft, political corruption, and foreign interference, while it is obsessed with controlling what ordinary people say and think and feel. In Bill C, the government seeks to criminalize an emotion. Hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification that is stronger than disdain or dislike. It is criminal to detest, but legal to dislike. But to detest, of course, means to intensely dislike. That's the meaning of the word. So it will be legal to dislike, but criminal to intensely dislike. Now, where is the line between dislike and intensely dislike? Of course, nobody knows that. The line will be drawn wherever the authorities want it to be drawn, to punish speech that the government hates. Bill C-9 also criminalizes protests that, quote, provoke a state of fear. Not the fear of violence. We have offenses for that already. No. C-9 will prohibit protests that provoke a state of fear of offensive ideas. That is what the truckers were accused of. That's why Mark Carney described them as seditionists and terrorists. Bill C-9 will be used to prohibit peaceful protest, like the truckers, that the government hates. In a free country, and I mean in a genuinely free country, which we once claimed to be, you are allowed to hate other people. And you are allowed to say that you do. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to start with you, Professor Pardy, and because you're joining us virtually, you didn't have the privilege of seeing the Liberal members of this committee snickering as you were talking about the Liberal government's assaults on civil liberties in the past. But I think that is important context for what we're seeing here, because in your opinion, these are not benign provisions. These are significant expansions of the power of the state to regulate thoughts and emotions and expressions, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So when you look at language, and I'll ask you this as well after Professor Alford, but first, Professor Pardy, in your analysis of legislation in the past and your knowledge of statutes, when words are omitted from jurisprudence, that is not what codification of jurisprudence is, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So explain in practice, if you are a police officer that is doing an investigation or you are a judge weighing in on this, how significant is the omission of the words extreme manifestation from the definition of hate that exists in the common law now to the one that C9 puts in law in the criminal code?
Yes. So thank you for the question. And this is really Professor Alford's point. You have a common law, you have a jurisprudential context. The Supreme Court of Canada in the 2012 case of Whatcott describing what was a reasonable limit on freedom of expression. And let's just underline this. They said that this was a reasonable limit, but they also said that this is an infringement of freedom of speech. So what you have to start with in C9 is an infringement of freedom of speech. This definition does infringe freedom of speech. That's what the Supreme Court says. Okay, so this is an infringement from a government that claims to be a government of the Charter and of rights. So we start there, and then if you fiddle with the wording, if you leave words out, if you make it detestation or vilification and not and, for example, then you are downgrading the threshold above which you need to get in order to find that this is established, right? So it's a little bit of playing around with the words so as to appear as though you're doing exactly what the Supreme Court said, while you're not really doing that at all.
Professor Pardy, as the first openly gay member of this House, I'm very proud of my own identity. In 2008, when I studied in Australia, somebody shouted at me, told me to go back to Asia when I walk on the street. And more recently, in 2022, at Metrotown Station, one of the busiest SkyTrain stations in Vancouver, someone shouted at me and said, "What are you looking at, Asian? If you want to F-word, go to Davie Street. You say it is okay to hate people in this country. Do you agree what I was told is appropriate?"
Oh, I think it's very inappropriate. But that's not the question. The question is, should it be illegal? It's definitely inappropriate, but it should not be illegal. If people want to say stupid things and let everybody know that they're stupid people.
Thank you. So Canada's Charter
so.
protects freedom of expression, but it also protects safety and dignity of every person. So do you believe it's ever acceptable in a democratic country to justify hate toward others using disguise of free speech?
It's not a disguise. So earlier, Ms. Dillon basically asked, well, what are we supposed to do otherwise? And the answer to that is, you're supposed to prosecute violence. Violence is supposed to be criminal. And the failures that we're experiencing is because violence is not being properly prosecuted and punished. Violence is the line. It's not language.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So everyone agrees that hate-motivated violence has no place in Canada. Would you agree that the government has a responsibility to ensure that Canadians live and can live and worship safely, free from fear?
Free from violence, yes, free from violence. If you fear violence because of the threat of violence, then that should be criminal. Yes, the assault, which is a threat of violence, is criminal already. It's nothing to do with C9. We already have provisions in the criminal code that prohibit violence and the threat of violence. That is appropriate. We're not talking about that. We are talking about trying to keep people safe from some other boogeyman when violence is absent, and that is the mistake.
Thank you.
Professor Pardy, by lowering the threshold for what constitutes hate speech and removal of the requirement for Attorney General consent, do you think it opens the way for potential politically motivated prosecutions?
Yes.
Can you maybe expand on how that might happen?
Well, because you will have a criminal provision that is completely uncertain in its meaning, and the people who are out there on the street will have no conception about where the line is between things that are okay and things that are not. And you don't have a check on political decisions like Professor Alford just alluded to. And so you basically have an open book. You can if you have the political wherewithal, the means to direct certain outcomes, then certain prosecutions, certain initiatives, then of course that's what you will do. And that is a poor way to construct the law. You are asking for trouble instead of trying to design the law so as to prevent the possibility of that kind of outcome.
Professor Pardy, Bill C-11, Bill C-18, Bill C-63 from the previous Parliament, and now we have C-9. What do you think it is with this Liberal government that's been in power now for over 10 years and their general aversion to free expression and persistent attempts to restrict free speech in Canada?
Well, there does seem to be a determination to make sure that the government is the one supervising people's speech. And I would like to emphasize the distinction that I alluded to earlier, which is that the proper restriction on speech in my books is one that distinguishes between violence and speech that is not violent. So it's perfectly adequate to limit speech by saying you cannot use speech to threaten violence. That makes sense, and we have that in our laws already. We had them for a long time. But all of these legislative initiatives, especially Bill 63, which was, for my money, the worst of the lot, but including C9, is attempting to cross that threshold and say, well, even if violence is not involved, even if you are not threatening violence, you're still not allowed to say certain things because we don't like it. And that's where you get into dangerous territory with freedom of speech. That begins to mean that your guarantee, your constitutional guarantee of free speech is not that at all. You can just compare the Canadian state on this to the situation in the United States. I mean, we both have, in both countries have a constitutional guarantee of free speech. In the United States, the government is not allowed constitutionally to limit speech, which here would be called hate speech. Hate speech is not a thing in the U.S. because the courts have said that is protected speech. And yet we've ended up in a situation here in the legislation that you're alluding to, where the government is trying here and there and everywhere to try and limit how people talk.
Professor, what do you foresee as the worst case scenario of this bill should it pass? What is the slippery slope? Could we see people being arrested for edgy social media posts? Could we see political opponents? I have to bring up this hate speech thing. We have Liberal members of Parliament who have accused Jordan Peterson of hate speech, who have accused the recently assassinated Charlie Kirk of hate speech. Are they not, by making this accusation and then putting forward a bill like C9, essentially calling for their political opponents to be jailed?
Yes, well, potentially. Anyway, I mean, you wouldn't want to make that accusation without some concrete information, but essentially, yes, you could see happening in Canada the kind of thing that has been happening in the UK, where the police are sent out on missions to crack down on people saying, dangerous things online. I mean, that is not the situation you want in a country that claims to be free. You do not want a political role in determining what people can say. And the Jordan Peterson case is an excellent example.
So I just want to put things into context. Professor Pardy, you mentioned that people should be allowed to hate and allowed to say that you do hate. And in a way, as long as they don't encourage violence, I guess people can hate. As long as they don't incite, I guess they're allowed to say that they hate. I don't disagree with you. We can morally say that's wrong. For example, one of the things that you once said, Canadians have been sold a bill of goods. Many of them think that they have a right to equal treatment under the law. They think that discrimination is illegal, but nothing could be further from the truth. In Canada, discrimination is lawful as long as it is committed against the right groups, and in particular against straight white men. I think we can both agree that many people might disagree with what you just said there, but I don't know that you would argue that this bill would allow anyone to decide that that would be hate speech, would you? You wouldn't imply that this bill is going so far as to criminalize that type of speech, are you?
I'm sorry, to criminalize what kind of speech?
The speech like you just made, the speech where you declared that, for example, straight white men were the ones that were discriminated against in Canada. That you're not arguing that this type of law would stop you from saying that, are you?
I don't think I would go quite that far. What you're reading from is a legal analysis. So if we get to a place in this country where doing a legal analysis is criminal, then we're in really bad shape. But I wouldn't have jumped to there. No.
Professor Pardy, I'd like to return to you on this. Are you aware that the Ontario Human Rights Commission views misgendering someone, identifying them as the wrong gender, to be discrimination and to be against the law of the Ontario Human Rights Code?
Yes.
So when we saw Bill C-16 in a previous parliament, this was the bill that led Jordan Peterson to speak out so vocally on this. This was expanding Canadian human rights law to include gender identity and effectively embedding in Canadian human rights law the very similar provisions that we have in various provincial human rights codes, correct?
Correct.
So I realize the Canadian Human Rights Act does not itself tie to the criminal code, but it does give a sense of where the government wants to go with this, especially looking at Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act from the previous parliament. And do you see misgendering as being something that could attract a hate charge, the way that this government has viewed hate and the way that C-9 is worded?
Certainly. Potentially. Sure. There's no reason to think not.
My question is, what are the implications on limiting the ability to hash out controversial subjects in society?
Well, they could be devastating. Yes. So there's back when C-16 was being debated, I was a witness at one of the Senate committee meetings, and one of the senators in that meeting said to me, "Well, look, I'm a free speech guy, but this requiring people to use proper pronouns is just reasonable speech. It's reasonable speech, and therefore it's reasonable legislation." And that completely misconceives the whole idea. The job of the government is not to legislate reasonable speech. If you had a statute that said Canadians will be required to say hello and please and thank you, because that's reasonable speech, that is totalitarian. Because speech is something that people decide for themselves. And so as long as the government thinks that its role is to make sure that people are speaking reasonably, then you're totally off on the wrong track. People's speech is their own unless, for my money, unless they are threatening violence. And if you're over that threshold, you're going to get into the potential for the kinds of problems that you are alluding to. And that potential is very, very real.
Okay. Well, appropriately, thank you.
I'll permit you to answer for my friend's benefit. The call in Montreal was for extermination of the Zionists, or supposedly a prayer for extermination of the Zionists. Do you believe that that is protected speech?
No, I in the abstract, if you say to me, if you call for the death of people, whether it's particular people or a group of people, that in my books is not okay. So I don't think you should be able to hide behind the context of that advocacy. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Professor Pardy, I'd like to talk about a few elements of the bill that haven't spoken, that have yet to be addressed today.
Yes.
The new criminal hate offense can be laid in response to any offense contrary to any act of parliament. Is that correct?
Right. Sounds like it. Yep.
Yeah. So, in other words, you can predicate the standalone criminal hate offense on conduct that is not necessarily criminal.
Sure, that's correct. That's possible. Yep.
So, for instance, you could suggest that non-payment of wages under the Canada Labour Code, if it is motivated by hate, could lead to a criminal charge.
Correct.
You could suggest that if someone's engaged in the suppression of votes under the Canada Elections Act,
Yes.
that could lead to a criminal charge.
Yes.
I find that very, very concerning.
So do I.
Especially given that the government appears to, well, in fact, seeks to lower the bar to convict of hate, and at the same time as removing the safeguard of the Attorney General. Would you recommend that we confine the application of the standalone hate offense to offenses that are truly criminal in nature?
Well, first, yes, absolutely. But second, I would recommend that you get rid of it altogether. And that's because what you are now doing, even if you limit it to criminal offenses, you are setting up two tiers of violent offenses. So let's compare two things. Let's say somebody assaults two different people, and one of them, they just choose somebody randomly on the street, or they pick somebody that they know. And in the second case, they pick somebody because of their identity. And in both cases, they do exactly the same thing. They beat them up. Okay? Both of those things are wrong. They're both offenses, and they're both equal because the amount of violence is equal. And what we're doing now is saying, well, one of those is if there's any kind of intimidation or violence involved in the sense that we have criminal code offenses that can be applied there. And if those offenses do not apply because the elements are not there, then all you're talking about probably is speech, and speech should be fine.
I would think that if you're intimidating someone while obstructing them from entering a premise, that would be assault.
You think so? Yes. If you have actual obstruction, if you are standing in the way and you're moving around to make sure that they can't get around you and yelling in their face, then that sounds like a criminal code offense that we already have. Yes.
Professor Pardy, I look at this bill overall. The government is lowering the bar for what hate speech is. It's removing the safeguard of the Attorney General consent, potentially opening folks to politically motivated prosecutions. You can lay the new hate charge on top of what is essentially civil conduct. I don't understand why this Liberal government is so obsessed with criminalizing freedom of expression.
I don't either. I wish I knew.
Thank you, Mr. Pardy.
Catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching this one. Like, share, subscribe, get notified. Come and watch one of the live shows. We cover question period on every day. And Bruce Pardy is brilliant. We'll be paying attention to this guy moving forward, no doubt. That's it. Thank you for watching the video. We cover question period every day. Come and watch